Hey, what is going on, IK Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder. We are back again today, giving you some more of that IK goodness. So, one of the things I would love to talk about today is this thought that I have been having. Great way to intro there, BN. Now, as always, before we get started, make sure you guys sub, like, ring that notification bell, and of course, make sure if you want to be a part of our conversation, you can join our Discord, which you can find in the pinned comment or description below. So, this idea that has been stirring in my brain a little bit has really kind of been coming into the outlook of kind of overall participation when it comes to KvK, right? With obviously KvK at the moment being pretty much at the forefront of what not only Infinity Kingdom is presenting, pushing, what is very appealing to the majority player, right? If not everyone, and respectfully so, once they understand what it is and how fun it can be. What is the appropriate time, right? What are the expectations that we should have for players in our servers as far as them engaging, them participating, right? When is a good time for them to do it? And so I started thinking about this today, and I imagine this is going to be a little bit kind of give or take, and this is more of a question I want to pose as I kind of talk this thought out on a few different sides of it. Because initially I started thinking to myself, well, what if you just allow players to just fully develop, right, kind of get to what I would refer to as a minimum threshold of, right, having all their buildings at 40, having all T5, regardless of where anything else was, right? Like, just allow for them to limit the amount of resources they need to on multiple areas. Because you have to think about, what are you doing when you start playing, right? What are all the areas that you're investing resources into? Where you're investing it into troop training, healing, you're investing it into building upgrades, and then research upgrades. And, of course, you can make the argument for artifacts as well, but just kind of focusing on the primary ones at the moment is that, right, if you want, right, and then how does this kind of translate over to KvK when it comes to being efficient? So, right, arguably, to put yourself in the most ideal situation, right, for KvK, is you want to limit your resource output, right, or what you're having to expend your resources on, and then focus it on the areas that are by far the most important. And ideally, in this case, would be troop training and healing, right? Those are the most important resource points for players in KvK. You don't want to use resources on building upgrades or tech upgrades. You would really want to be done with those things, right? You would be in this ideal situation if you have them already at max. But it's not realistic to think that you're going to, because again, you're gonna hit max buildings at 40 well before you hit max academy. So it is a little unrealistic to think of, okay, well, we need to wait, right? Like, if you were to tell players in your server, let's wait to participate in KvK until you have maxed buildings and maxed academy, right? And then, even if some people said VIP, even though you're not really spending resources on VIP, you're even spending resources on, maxing out talk skills or artifacts, right? Those things are going to take longer, right? And that's understandable. But the idea that I started to have was, what if you just tell people, hey, focus 100% on development until you at least max your buildings and hit T5. And then once that happens, you have eliminated one major resource expending area, being buildings, and now you funnel all of the resources, right, that you were, because most of us are usually upgrading buildings and doing academy tech, and then of course the troop training and the healing at the same time. But for the two big ones, being building and research, typically for those two we are doing them side by side. And so if you spent the $5 and you have the extra builder, and then you're doing the building contract, you basically have 4 queues going at all times, right? Which means you have 3 buildings that you're investing resources in, and then 1 academy tech, right? If you were to, right, and if you're free to play, you're probably doing 3, right, with the contractor, so you have 2 queues plus the academy tech. If you eliminate 2 to 3 of those options, right, because remember, you're using all of your resource income from your production buildings to anyone you hit to get resources from to your general everyday gathering into 3 to 4 areas. If you limit that into 1 area, you now have more resources available over a longer period of time that you can now invest more appropriately, right, for more meaningful things. So now, right, if you, let's say, and this is kind of in the example I'm providing it, one way of looking at it is, if you just focus on kind of doing like the WoW approach, right, where you just like min-max to, max level. In this case, it would be, right, buildings at 40, you get your T5 troops, then you are now in a more favorable position to impact and to play a more significant role, or valued role, if you want to look at it that way, when it comes to KvK. So it's just interesting on the idea of, when you kind of look at how do you start, what are your, what's your resource expenditure, right, throughout the period of day 1, right, up until you get max. What are some of the focusing factors that go into KvK? How are we looking at resource, right, incomes, and then what's going out? And how are we min-maxing, right, in the best way possible? And so this is again, I'm just kind of throwing the idea out here because I find that what we're seeing a lot of, and this is something I'm actually seeing pretty consistently across other servers, and I would love to know if this is something that you as players, or even if you're in management for your server, that you see as well, is that players, we're pretty much seeing like the Castle 40s and above, right? So like Castle, not above, but like mainly the Castle 40s that I'm seeing the majority of, if not a lot of, not only from our server, but from other servers as well. And yeah, you will have somewhat of a mix of castles that are below that. But I'm finding that the castles that are more consistently engaging and more consistently staying, again, after the war period, right, in KvK specifically, is happening from the kind of Castle 40 threshold, from the players that are there, right, that are staying kind of beyond the war period, right, or through once the war period starts and then beyond, right, and they're more consistently going back, whereas the Castle 39s and below, again, I would say the bulk or the majority of them that I've noticed, not only from our server but from other servers, is that they're prioritizing what it seems to be, right, and maybe they're doing this directly or indirectly, but they're prioritizing, right, still leveling their buildings, because if they're fighting all day and they're going through their healing and their training speed ups and their resources, that's less resources now that they were stockpiling to do that next academy tech upgrade or the next building upgrade, right? Now they might only be able to have 1 building upgrade going at a time. And so I think the longer term investment of players focusing on maxing out building level on their accounts, right, before they consider going in to KvK, specifically the war periods, right, the war portions, right? Now, again, every server had, I'm sure, good, if not great activity prior to Zone 1 opening up, right, or the Zone 1 adjacent gates opening up specifically, right? And there was plenty of players that came over to KvK that were Castle 20s and 30s, right? Just like I'm sure other servers had as well. But once the war started, and that's probably more of the focus here that I'm really getting at, that was when I started noticing, not only from adjacent servers in our KvK group, but even just from some conversations I've been seeing on the official IK Discord, and from players that have accounts on other servers that I talk to and that have said these things publicly, is that they're noticing this trend of, because the war started so early, and even if it didn't start that early, right? I mean, and this kind of goes into how KvK plays out, which is something I briefly spoke about in the video yesterday, 2 days ago, is that when you open the war area so early, right, the players who still need to hit, right? They still need to do more building, more building upgrades, and to some of them vital building upgrades. It is more cost effective for them to go back to the home kingdom because they also get the alliance territory bonus consistently, right, from them as well, where they're not having to vie for cities all the time, right? Especially if they're in like a contested area. Being in your kind of safe zone 1, right, up until the zone 1 passes open, I think was okay, and we still saw a great amount of players coming over. But once that war started is when we started seeing these transitions and trends kind of developing, which it only really makes sense when you look at it from kind of a bare minimum or a bare bones perspective. Is that they want to be able to consistently gather at the highest rate that they can per day in order to always have their building upgrades going and eventually reach that max building level in T5. So this is just my thought, and I would love to hear what some of you have been experiencing right in your KvKs. Have you noticed this happening once the Zone 1 gates passes opening, where maybe you ended up having more of your Castle 39s and belows heading back to your home kingdom for some of these reasons or others? Right? Did you notice something different? And then what I will end with, and this is something I did mention in the previous video as well, is my suggestion on just thinking that it is okay to test things, but I do feel that Zone 1 gates should open last. Right? I think when we look at other models for KvK, right, from other kingdom builders, there are good takeaways. Right? And it doesn't mean that we always have to be innovative in every single thing that we do. Right? We can look at something and really walk ourselves through why does the process occur the way it does. And again, as we've hinted or mentioned before, right, if you want longevity in KvK and you want servers to enjoy KvK throughout as long as they possibly can, right, you would go with what I would refer to as kind of what we're now seeing and being a part of other KvKs and SVS is kind of the standard experience of, everyone gets into their Zone 1 just like how they've done so far. You have the Zone 2 passes opening, right, for each server, and then they can choose, right, depending if they're in a quarter or a middle flex position, can go into Zone 2, fight it out, then Zone 3, then you, after that, have the Zone 1 adjacent passes open. That's what I would love to see going into the KvK Season 1. I think that change alone, right, just, again, we are going to do a video talking about KvK suggestions and feedbacks, right, and recommendations, but just that change alone could change the entire dynamic of how players morally feel better about it rather than kind of being subjected to the war immediately. Now, like I said, I like the fact that they tested something, right, and maybe they can use that in kind of like an off KvK variant or season, possibly for maybe something in the future, but at least going forward for now, right, I would love to see that change above all else, right, and again, we will do more, but that definitely, I think, needs to happen. But so let me know what you guys think. I know we talked about it a little bit, and again, I want to know if anything I've said so far lines up with what you're seeing, with what you're experiencing, with what you're hearing from some players that are in your server. Let me know in those comments down below. That's it for me. Until next time, we'll catch y'all later.